Welcome everyone who is here live and by replay to Eclipsed Live. In this session, we're going to be talking about eclipses, what they are and why they matter. And we'll have an overview understanding of eclipses, and then we're going to zero in on these eclipses that are coming up. But before we dive in, I want to hear from you in the chat, your name, where you're from, and what you're feeling. If you can offer a felt sense experience or description of what you might be experiencing. And a felt sense, if you don't know what that means or you've never heard that, is a descriptor of how you're feeling sensationally in your body. So I'm feeling heavy, I'm feeling light, I'm feeling itchy, I'm feeling open. So there are all these different words to describe how we might be feeling in the body. So I would love for you to share where you're at, what your name is, and a felt sense experience of life right now. So I'll read some of them. Leilani in Marina Del Rey is feeling tight. Donna in LA is feeling a little itchy, uncomfortable. Jennifer, also in LA, is feeling open. Karen feeling energized and appreciative. Slow and sweet. And Stephanie really noticing that change is happening. Absolutely. If you are sensitive, paying attention, or very affected by these eclipses, you likely are already starting to feel things building. That can show up as energy, as Christina's sharing, intensity, discomfort, angst, lots of emotion. So there's a lot of experiences that we can have during the eclipses. And before we go even deeper into the eclipses, I'm going to offer a little bit of a insight into the flow of our conversation today. So I'm going to share about the eclipses, what they are, why they matter, as I mentioned. I'll talk about the Scorpio and Taurus eclipses, and then I'm going to talk about them in context to the larger cycle. So what does this mean for us individually and collectively, not just these 2 weeks that we're in the midst of, but the larger cycle of 18 months and even bigger, larger cycles of 18 years and our whole lives or our collective evolution. And the reason why that's important to me is that I believe that when things are placed into context, our view becomes larger and we tend to feel more safe and contained. We often have better access or greater access to a sense of groundedness. And I tend to feel that when I have perspective, I can move through things a lot faster. I give myself permission to feel things more deeply because I know what they're there for. I know that there's a sort of an ending, or there's a sense that they're going to shift. They're not going to go on forever. And because of that, I tend to let go of things faster. And so placing things in context gives us the perspective to feel, to experience, because we know that it's not permanent. Sometimes when we have no context for things, the concept or the idea of kind of going deep into feeling or deep into the experience of it can feel very daunting. It can feel like, will I survive that, right? And being able to let go of things faster is a really good thing for these eclipses, because as we start to let things go faster, we start to let things go, then we can get the direction that we might be seeking. And I think a lot of us are seeking direction right now. We're wanting to make an impact. We're wanting to create a life of impact that impacts us. And we also recognize that our capacity can only handle so much. And so maybe there are other strategies that need to be explored. And so as we start to see these eclipses in a larger context, that direction may present itself. So throughout this experience, I'm going to be talking for the majority of it, which means that for the most part, we'll keep everything on mute and use the chat as we have been doing to connect with each other and to share. There may be opportunities where I invite you to share. Our session will be about an hour and 15 minutes as we get through everything. And with that, I want to introduce myself. So if you don't know me, my name is Julian Elizabeth, and I'm an astrologer, I'm a teacher, I coach and I mentor. And really one of my main missions is to support individuals to lead their lives from their hearts with courage and confidence. And I believe that when we have a healthy relationship with our hearts, with compassion, with self-trust, and with faith, then we're stronger and we're more dedicated and we're more focused and we can make a bigger impact. And to me, astrology is that tool to understand context. It places things in time and place and space, and it brings our view wider so that we can see things from a new perspective. And I really believe that life is inherently neutral. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just full. It's full of sensation and it's raw. And many of the experiences that we seek to meet our needs. And so understanding our core needs, using astrology and many other tools, places them in context to our lives. And that can support our experience and connect us. And when we're connected, we realize that most of what divides us is a perception. Most of what divides us can be more contrived to distract us. And I believe astrology is activism. I believe that it begins within, that activism begins within. And this is a framework for us to study our humanity, to study community and the collective and the way that we as people form and live together. My background previous to astrology and the work that I do is in sociology and integrated business. And I worked for a long time with some of the world's largest companies analyzing search and social behavior. And I realized in that process that the world is being shaped by what we buy and not by who we are. And so after doing that for almost a decade, I quit and I jumped into my own search to understand who I was. And I began teaching yoga and coaching. And over the last 10 years, I've really been able to travel the world and work with so many people. In that, I've learned so much of who I am. And I found these tools that really have helped me. And astrology is a major one of those. And so I share from a place to help us understand ourselves, who we are and who we are collectively, so that the world can become shaped by who we are at our core, us knowing ourselves and knowing our worth, rather than having our worth being driven by data and algorithms. And so I study this because I seek it. It's helped me grow and it's brought me healing and has been a map on my journey of seeking, lots of seeking. I'm incredibly human. I'm highly sensitive, and I'm really learning in my journey how to navigate being highly sensitive without turning that off and without shaming it or dislocating myself from it, but integrating it into who I am and how I work. And so my growth really is a testament to my commitment to myself and to preserving my highly sensitive nature, even when it's a lot. And I know that many in my community are also highly sensitive, and I commiserate and I speak to many of you around how often that is a lot. And so I aim to support you to feel and to process and to move what needs to be moved so that you can embrace your sensitive nature, as I'm learning continuously to embrace mine. And location-wise, I'm based primarily in Los Angeles, but I travel a lot, and travel is one major way where I am able to really connect with the world, with myself. So that's me. And with that, I want to dive into eclipses with you. So again, feel free to use the chat if you resonate with what I'm sharing, or you want to connect in a certain way, to share what you're going through. That is our space to connect. Okay. So I have some slides, but I'm going to bounce in and out of using slides, but images can sometimes be fantastic to illustrate. So what is an eclipse? Well, let's start with some definitions. So we look in my beautiful not to scale diagram and see that, as we all know in this day and age, the sun is the center of the universe, the center of the solar system, and the earth revolves around the sun. However, from our perspective here on earth, we don't live on the sun, we live on earth. And so from our perspective, it appears that the sun is revolving around the earth. And that path of the earth's travel around the sun, or what appears to us as the sun's travel around the earth, is called the ecliptic. And that is the apparent path of the sun around the earth, created by the earth's orbit around the sun. And it's not just the sun that travels on this ecliptic. Roughly from our vantage point, most planets travel around this ecliptic, and we can know this ecliptic by the zodiacal constellations that are Aries and Taurus and Gemini and Cancer and all the way around to Pisces. And so when we look up at the sky and we see the path of the sun, the path of the moon, and other planets that we're able to visibly see, we see them traveling through the zodiacal constellations. And that is from our perspective. However, that is our main influence. And astrology helps us to understand our relationship to it all. And so along this ecliptic, we also have a second axis, and we have the moon in its orbit around the Earth. And we know that that happens over about a 28-day period. So every 28 days, the moon returns to or forms a new path. And so it goes around the Earth in that time. And so where these two orbits intersect are what are called the nodes. These are the eclipses. So we have eclipses that occur where the sun in its apparent revolution around the Earth and the moon in its actual revolution around the Earth intersect. And they intersect about every 6 months, and they intersect in a set of zodiacal constellation signs. So we'll get a lot deeper into this as we start to look at eclipses from the astrological perspective. But in terms of astronomy, we have some key points, and these key points also pull into the astrology. And so these key points are called the nodes. And so every planet has a node, has a set of nodes. Essentially, this is their axis, their tilt. There's one node that's sort of tilting as we would see to the north, and one that is tilting towards the south. And in our understanding of eclipses, we look at the nodes of the moon. And so the lunar nodes are where the moon's orbit intersects with that ecliptic. And the north node is where the moon moves into the northern ecliptic hemisphere. And the south node is where the moon moves into the southern ecliptic hemisphere. And so the north node is pointing north and the south node is pointing south. Awesome. And so what is an eclipse? So eclipse is where the sun and the moon join with the lunar nodes. They always come in pair and triplets, pairs or triplets. So for the most part, we see eclipses happen in pairs. We'll see them as a new moon and a full moon, or a full moon or a new moon. And sometimes when we're in the midst of major change and transformation, we'll see them actually appear in triplets. So we'll see them appear in a set of 3. And so 2020 was a notable year because we actually, instead of having 6 eclipses or 4 eclipses, we actually had 7 eclipses. We had a lot of transformation and change coming to the surface. And if you think about where the sun and the moon join with the lunar nodes at this axis, it's an opportunity of perfect alignment. So we have the new and the full moon when they come together as a new moon, or when they're opposing each other as a full moon, they're slightly off by a few degrees. But when we experience the new and full moon eclipses, everything lines up to the same degree. And so it's this perfect alignment moment. And we can start to take that into the more esoteric or ethereal realm when we start thinking about what would that mean for me? Well, perhaps we could think about it meaning that certain things are coming into perfect alignment, that we're being moved in a certain way that's part of our destiny. And as we look at eclipses from the astrological perspective, we see that word destiny showing up. And for the sake of understanding what's going on in the sky, the solar eclipse is a new moon. It's when the sun and the moon are in the same place in the sky, and the moon blocks the light of the sun, which places Earth in the shadow of the moon. And so you'll see that here in the top video. Okay, and sometimes we'll see that as a ring of light at that time of perfect eclipse. And then the lunar eclipse is the full moon, and that's when the Earth blocks the light of the sun and it places the moon in the shadow of the Earth. And so we'll see that in the bottom video here, where we'll see the full moon sort of disappear for a period of time as the Earth's shadow blocks it. And it's in these moments when light is blocked in some way that we're guided to look deeper into what is unseen, what can't be seen in the light. What is shadowed takes power. The light is blocked in some way. So we start to get into metaphor and looking a little bit deeper at these themes. Yeah. So with that, let's talk about the astrology of the lunar nodes. The North Node in astrology is considered the head. It's what is pulling us forward. So if we think about ourselves being pulled forward, then it's through the North Node that our evolution is occurring. It's where we're being asked to evolve. There's an increasing emphasis of this sign or of this energy, and it's about what we're taking in and how we're growing. It's how we're asked to move forward. And then the South Node is the tail. The South Node is being pulled. And this is where we can get stuck if we think about this as like the heaviness that we want to move forward. We want to, propel ourselves forward. We have a dream, and why can't it just happen right away? Well, there's limiting beliefs, there's doubts, there's debts. There are things and reasons why we can't just have everything that we want or evolve as quickly as we want. We still get stuck. And this is our comfort zone. It represents where we're meant to decrease our emphasis, get out of the habits that we have. And so this is really referenced, especially in these eclipse times, as what we're letting go of. And the North and South Node together form what's called a nodal axis. So they come in a set of pairs that come together. And so the astrology of lunar nodes is that these two nodes, they form one pull where we're really meant to kind of let go of our emphasis of where the South Node is and lean into the emphasis of where the North Node is. And each eclipse that we have is sort of pulling us to that evolution. And so eclipses themselves are extra powerful lunations. Sometimes it's said that they have the power of 50 new or full moons. They have lasting power where we might feel a full moon or a new moon for 3 or so days. We'll feel an eclipse, new or full moon for sometimes up to 6 months, at least for the entire 2-week period that they're occurring. Often it's reported about a month or a month and a half at least. And so they happen in this polarity of signs. We're going to get into Scorpio and Taurus as the polarity that we're really working with. And we work with that polarity of signs over 18 months. And so these 18 months really indicate prolonged evolution. If we were to really look at how we're evolving, what we're learning, and how we're growing over an 18-month period of time, we can start to pair that with this deeper understanding that change doesn't happen in an instant, nor would we maybe really want it to. It's in our integration that we really grow and we learn. And so eclipses in themselves as individual experiences represent an opening and a closing. They're often where we start to unhook in certain ways and we start to lean in and hook in new ways. And so we're kind of crawling ourselves forward in certain ways. And our evolution as humans works more in a spiral than anything. And so we repeat these cycles. And we repeat them in reverse to find our balance about every 9 years. And we return to a similar journey every 18 years. And so taking some time to consider, if you can do the math, where you were at 9 years ago. I'll pull up those dates right here, 2012 to 2014. You might take a moment and perhaps share in the chat something that comes to mind in terms of your growth or notable things that happened to you within that frame of 2012 and 2014. Anyone have anything that comes to mind? So first yoga teacher training, me as well. I took my first yoga teacher training when it was 2011, 2012, when I quit that job that I was talking about. It was in this time frame. I moved to Los Angeles. So as you start to do that work and you'll be able to take some time to really contemplate this time, then you can really see that perhaps we're working to inverse that polarity a little bit. And so you might be reconciling a change of heart from where you were in 2012 to 2014, sort of a pull of, is this still the direction that I want to go? As Megan shared, first heartbreak, first move to Los Angeles, or the first month of silence. Wow, that sounds amazing, Donna. So as Donna referenced, we want to look back 18 years as well. So 2003 to 2005, can you locate anything that was going on for you during that time? Some of us I know were maybe young, and so we didn't have as much autonomy, but there was perhaps some major shifts that were happening during that time. And so 2003 to 2005, 18 years ago, can you go back into history within yourself and locate some of the things that you were reconciling, learning? Megan was at the top of her game in her dancing career, really unstoppable. So maybe this is a return to confidence, a return to being at the top of your game and really claiming your sense of power. First big family move for Christina in 2003. 2003 to 2005 was when I was really kind of figuring out where I was going to go to college, what choices I was going to make related to that. I left the country for the first time in my life during that period of time. That was really big. And if you know about my life, I leave the country a lot. I travel a lot. And so that set in motion a lot of change for me and me really seeing the world in a bigger way. Awesome. So we'll have some time to look at some more dates, because astrology, like I said, is all about the cycles of things. And, really when we think about our own evolution within this axis, and I pulled up that chart of houses, which I'll show you again briefly or in a moment. These are where the nodes may be influencing us, and we have our own personal nodes as well. We have where the north and south node when we were at when we were born. And so in understanding our own natal north and south node, we can understand more of our own purpose. What is it that I am here to learn in this life? What are my key lessons? And in order to learn those key lessons, where do I sometimes get stuck in my limiting beliefs or in my comfort zones? Right. And so we need the friction of the south node and the resistance of the south node in order to grow. And we can take this out of the nodal conversation and just look at the friction of life as we know it, the friction of the world, of the forces coming against forces. It's how we awaken. It's when we see certain things being resisted that we start to understand what our own beliefs are. That's not okay with me. I agree with that. We don't always come to those conclusions on our own. We need to see it externalized out into the world in order for us to really harness what is true for us. And a lot of that is what's happening right now. And so in order to sustain our growth and evolve, we need time and we need space and we need experiences. And this in itself is traumatic. Time in itself is traumatic. It's like the waiting games that we play, or the times when things happen faster than we are ready for. And so time and space help us to integrate. They help us to grow. It's the only way. And so we need the slowdown of the south node in order to see where we're hooked in. And so understanding your personal south node can help to give a framework and an understanding of where your resistance is and what that might be waking you up to. And so, as I said, we will meet our own south node every 9 years and every 18 years. So in any repetition of 9. And so if you personally are in a 9-year, 9, 18, 27, on and on and on. I don't think there are any 9-year-olds who signed up for this webinar, but if you have a 9-year-old, they're going through their first sort of nodal opposition. And something that I think doesn't get talked about, it is true node. Yeah. And so something that doesn't get talked about, I think, is that I believe that we're really integrating from the past nodal cycle. So every 18 months, we shift into a new nodal cycle. So for the 18 months previously, we are growing in a slightly different way. We're learning certain lessons, but because we need time and space to integrate and growth, it is through us realizing what has changed after the fact that helps us integrate where we were and sets the stage for our current evolution. And so really with that, we grow through perspective. We're integrating the last cycle within this cycle and coming to the awareness of our growth. And that newfound growth is what moves us forward. And so time and space place us, and they also heal us. And when we are processing our emotions and our experiences of our emotions, that's when we get perspective. And that's when we start to make changes. And the changes that are happening for us now are a result of the growth that was happening in the last cycles of the eclipses. And so eclipse periods of time, sometimes called hinge points or curtain points. It's like when the curtains close, an act ends and they open and a new act begins. And so what can happen during this time is a culmination, right? It's the the moment before the applause, when the character wins or the character dies or a relationship dynamic changes. So we tend to see a crescendo, a big moment happen during eclipses. And that's really what we could anticipate over this next month. And we're already feeling that building and building and building as things get more big. So I'd love to hear, before we dive into these specific eclipses, sort of what you might be feeling building for you and where you're observing yourself different without really trying to consciously try to be different. If you were to think about, say, the last 2 years of your life, what is 1 or 2 words that would really anchor in the growth you've been able to sustain and experience in your own confidence or body? Stephanie has a greater sense of her own self, or of what's important to her. Megan, self-worth and patience. For me, I am noticing that through my growth of the last several years, there is a more integrated sense of self. And as Megan said, self-worth and patience. I know Megan and I are both Gemini risings. And so this can relate to the rising sign and how we have been able to integrate our own sense of self, our own healing over the last several years. And now we're confronting life differently. We're approaching life differently. And so how are you approaching life differently than you were over the last couple of years? How is 2020 to 2022 really shifted how you're showing up, right? Being able to observe without judgment, shift perspective, let go, claim the self. And it's because of these changes that what is appearing for you now to let go of, what is presenting itself now to lean into, is possible. Amazing. Lots of change in focus and an integrated sense of self, which feels notably empowering. I love that. So I'm going to come back to this chart that I shared around the eclipses and where they may be showing up for you. And so if you do know what house in your chart that Taurus and Scorpio are, and you can kind of reference that in your own memory, then you can reference this chart. And if you don't know, well, I'll share at the end how you can find this out. And you can also look up your chart on your own. I will, in the recording package that you get at the end of the session, share with you a link that will walk you through the process of pulling your chart and identifying where Taurus and Scorpio are. However, we want to also understand Taurus and Scorpio collectively for us all, not just where it lands in your own individual chart. You can consider where it lands in your individual chart as your own flavor of evolution. And collectively, there's a concurrent evolution of Scorpio and Taurus that we're walking through together. And that is the axis between the second house and the eighth house. And so we'll see that the North Node lands, pulling us to look at money, possessions, values, resources, skills, what we have to offer, what we're reaching for, Taurus. Has anyone had any consideration of money, possessions, investments, resources over the last 6 to 12 months? Like, where are we going? Thinking about money, our own having of it, how relevant it is, right? And then we see the South Node in the eighth house, which is death, letting go, regeneration, other people's money and resources. How are we sharing, right? And so that is sort of what we're seeing as coming to the surface, as that's got to shift. We've got to let go of our attachment to that. So what are we seeing? Supply chain issues, resources being, blocked or obstructed because of other people's drama, like, wars and atrocities, much bigger and more weighty than other people's drama, but pulling into this same category of we are all interconnected, and someone else's shadow and darkness influences us because we're an interwoven web. And how is that helping us? And how is that really harming us? And is it more helpful for us to be connected in a vast way, or is it more important for us to be connected in a local way? And in what ways are we having to wrestle with that and find our way? And how do our possessions and our resources feed into that? And so, do I have a garden? Am I supplying my own food? Do I know where my food is coming from? Well, what happens if where I'm coming from my food is faced with war or natural disaster? What then happens to my resources? Am I in community with my neighbors, or am I at war with my neighbors? Am I in major debt to other people? Am I obligated to other people that for me to kind of make the choices for myself feels very far away or feels very difficult? And so we may be reconciling themes or shades of this. What do we have, and how do we circulate that? And that axis is continuing for 18 months. So Scorpio and Taurus in the big picture. These two signs come together. They are one polarity. So if you are a Taurus, you're also a Scorpio. If you're a Scorpio, you're also a Taurus. When we understand one, we understand the other. They are voids of each other. And so Scorpio and Taurus in the big picture, they are the axis of life and death. Taurus is ruled by Venus, Scorpio is ruled by Mars. They represent destruction and fertility, life-giving and life-taking away. It is our attachment and our bonding. It is our relationship to security and insecurity. It's also what we hold on to, Taurus, and then what holds on to us. So we might be really reconciling these hooks, the invisible hooks that are within us. Because Scorpio deals with the unconscious and the shadow, what can come to the surface during these Scorpio-Taurus eclipses are the ways that our own shadow and our own unconscious are involved in what we're actually manifesting. We're manifesting our reality at all times. And so if we aim to have one thing and it's not actually coming to life, well, what's actually going on beneath the shadow and beneath the surface that is creating our reality as well? And that might become very obvious and very clear during these big times of the ways that we are sabotaging ourselves, or we're saying yes to something. And by saying yes to something, we're saying no to something else. And so this is the tangible and the unknown. It's how we give and receive in order to feel safe. It's our primary motivations, which inherently can be manipulative. It can be dark and shadowy. How we get our needs met as people involves some form of manipulation. And it's not to say that that's actually wrong. It's to understand deeper, what are the needs that we're trying to get met, and how do we get those needs met? When we pull these two apart and we look just at the North Node in Taurus, we are talking about self-worth. We're talking about embodiment, what our standards are and the values we hold for ourselves. It's what we're building, what we're drawing in for stability and security, and it's what's conscious and seen. So it's the tangible. And when we look just at the South Node in Scorpio, we see merging. We see the ways that we're not just individuals, that there's an intimacy to the way that we live in life, and that is raw, and that is juicy, and it is just as beautiful as it is disgusting and smelly and noisy, right? We live all together as one, and humans themselves, the ways that we kind of brush up and connect with each other can sometimes, as we see in the world very strongly right now, can sometimes be horrible or horrific. And that's as real as the current reality that might just exist within our smaller individual frame. And so the South Node, if we're to look at this as this mutual, like, cesspool melting pot of humanity, when we just stay there and we make our worldview on that, on what is, really just intertwined and getting us stuck, we can get lost from the beauty of nature and of our nature and of what's here, right here in the moment, our close relationships and our resources. And sometimes when we get really plugged into our own self and our own lack and our own worthiness and our own insecurity, we can miss the bigger picture that we are all interconnected. And that's also beautiful. And so these eclipses don't just happen where it's just Taurus and it's just Scorpio. They move back and forth and they pull us in the directions of our growth and our evolution, and then where we get stuck and where we get stuck because it's comfortable, and maybe we need that comfort and we need to preserve aspects of our comfort. And then maybe also we need to shed some things in order to grow. And so usually during eclipse times, we can feel really pulled in order to release something or in order to affirm something. And so I'm back here on these dates, and I'm just pulling up this chart for us to look at the current eclipses. And I'm just going to leave this up here for a brief moment of time. And so if you want to note down some of these dates and the dates that have passed and the dates that are coming in order to look at the whole path of growth here. So our first eclipse of this series began last November on the 19th, the Taurus full moon. Full moons tend to be major points of release or awareness of what is on its way to release. And so perhaps over that week of November 19th last year, there were experiences that came up that you can now realize you've shifted from, or as a result of. And if you have a story of that, or you want to share anything of that, please pop it into the chat. And our next series of eclipses, set of eclipses within the series, happened in April and May of this year, 2022. We had the Taurus new moon eclipse at the end of April, and then 2 weeks later, the Scorpio full moon eclipse. And so new moons, new beginnings, this was really us sort of starting something, seeing a new aspect of us or a new chapter for us. And then perhaps there was some underbelly of letting go during that Scorpio full moon, of seeing still there are things hooked into me. There are still, say, limiting beliefs or debts or, old energies that I'm here to let go of. And I guess that's what I would love to hear is there anything that you're realizing is hooked into you, the invisible hook? Like, I'm still stuck on that thing. That thing's still stuck in me. I also began the process of ending a relationship that same week, Karen. So I feel you on that. I know we've talked about that. So what could be hooked in to you that you're still sort of, I don't know, pricked by, or is still holding you to the past? Pulling down these dates and these times so that I can just chat with you. And so the major themes that we can really start to play with when it comes to this series of eclipses that we're stepping into is that there are certain ways that the past is really holding us back. And that is something that we might see come up real strong during the full moon eclipse on November 8th in Taurus. It is conjunct Uranus, and it will activate the square between Uranus and Saturn that I won't get into super deep in this session. However, we can think about it as the ways that we are wanting evolution and revolution and more forward motion into the future, and then the ways that the power structures and time and the old way of doing things is holding us back from that. And it's within that friction of wanting to push forward and being blocked that more awakening happens, more awareness happens. As I was saying, it's through friction and being slowed down that we realize where we want to and need to be free. And more people come to that realization as things happen, as blocks happen, as painful as it can be to see the forces that we give our power to sort of blocking certain freedoms and certain things moving forward, or telling us we have to do things in a certain way. It's through that block that more awakening happens, that more people rise up and fight against that or stand to that. And it's through the friction that we actually break free and come free. And so sometimes that is in a heartbreaking way. Sometimes that is in a very challenged way. And again, we can keep our perspective really broad and talk about it without the core emotionality of how challenging that is to see it in real time. And it's also important to be in real time and in humanity and understand the depth of feeling that is. It is just as important for us to understand things in the larger context of a historical cycle as it is for us to be present in the historical moment that we're in and recognize that we are walking through a time of major revolution and change. We are walking through a time of destruction where death and decay are very present in our current reality. Scorpio themes rising to the surface. We are walking through a time where we are seeing things falling apart. We're seeing the irrelevance of things that once held relevance for us. And that in itself can be very emotionally difficult. It can be very psychologically difficult. And we're facing that at this time, and we are made for that. That is why we are walking through this time in this current incarnation. However, we have to remember that that is at times a lot, especially as sensitive people who may be feeling things other people are not feeling or are not able to feel. We might be feeling more because there is more, it is more intense. And so placing that in the larger context of what's going on can be helpful, and resourcing yourself in the current now is also very imperative and very essential. It's all there. All right, let's look a little bit closer at our upcoming couple weeks. Because here we are. So I would say like on Thursday may have been, if you haven't been feeling it building for a while, we're seeing more and more people kind of looking around like what's going on starting this past week, because as the sun starts moving into Scorpio, which it will land tomorrow, we're going to start to really feel the density of these eclipses. And so you may have seen, or you may know, that Venus and the sun are traveling very close together. So today, in fact, they come together, Venus and the sun conjunct. It's called a cazimi, and they will continue to stay in their dance through this next eclipse that we have on Tuesday. And this eclipse happens around 3:44 a.m. on Tuesday, October 25th at 2 degrees of Scorpio, and it's on the South Node. And so the South Node, we know it's the past and it's letting go. The new moon, we may know as a new beginning. And so this new moon really suggests that in order to have a fresh start, in order to move forward, we have to let something go. And this new moon is conjunct Venus. And so Venus, our relationships, our sense of beauty, our sense of worthiness, our resources, our money, our sense of justice and fairness, all Venus territory, what we fight for and stand up for. Think about Venus as the the energy of the goddess who claims her space and is also very ferocious. So it's not just Venus in this angelic embodiment, it's Venus rising and in fighting for what is right as well. And we see that on the world stage, and you may experience that in your life too. And so this solar eclipse in Scorpio is all about moving things out of your life that you don't want. You may be realizing in whispers and screams and major emotions that there are certain things that are just not working anymore. There are certain ways that you've been operating over and over and over again, and now you can't not see it. And so what isn't stable may become very clear in this eclipse. Major opportunity to let go. Megan just accepted a new job, is letting go of an old job. Again, we look at 2003 to 2005, you were unstoppable, you were claiming your worth, right? And so what isn't stable can become more apparent. How the unseen contributes to what you're manifesting is an important thing that we might start noticing, right? And so this is our unseen dynamics, the unseen dynamics within our psyche and in our shadow that are still hooking us into what we're manifesting and what's being created. And so if I have an underlying lack of self-worth and self-doubt, and that causes me to procrastinate because I don't know how to manage everything and I'm trying to prove myself, then that's going to show up in how we're manifesting. And so perhaps this new moon is an opportunity to let go of that. If I'm still hooked into a partnership that was toxic and hurtful or harmful for me, and they're still sort of hooked into me energetically, and that's actually holding me back from feeling open and expansive and welcoming of myself and of my heart or another heart, then it's time to really cut those cords. And I haven't said it yet, but if we come to an ultimatum moment and a realization that this is over, I need to let this go, the best time for us to really consciously, actively do that is during eclipses, because the results tend to be more permanent. And so if you are at an ultimatum point, it's either this or this, and you know it's this, consciously, actively let go of what is no longer. And because we're talking about the South Node and a new moon, we're really considering what it is that we value, what needs to be let go of or ended. And so if you have any unfinished business, any projects that you are just not fully complete with, this is a great time for you to complete that. Declutter your house, go through your closet, finish what was started last April or May, really start to close the door so that you can welcome in this new start, this new leap that will really be what's taking us forward from this eclipse next week. Is there anything that anyone wants to be held accountable for ending or completing in the next couple of days? share it in the chat. I have some tasks from my Yoga Nidra teacher training a couple of months ago that I need to complete and close. I have just some personal things that have been coming up that I'm ready to let go of. And then Karen has to finish her tiles. Perfect timing. New moons tend to be insular, so we might feel like staying home this weekend. This week, we might think not of starting new things. This is not the time to start new things. It's the time of completions, of finishing. Awesome. And so as we explore what holds us right now through this time, we look to this solar eclipse as an opportunity to let go of what holds us. Yeah, tons of completions, right? And completions are good. We need completions. They create space. And it's energetic completions and it's literal completions. It's clearing the actual literal clutter that we might have in our homes, and then the clutter we have in our hearts and in our heads. The more we can get free and clear over this next week and a half, the more that there's going to be space for us to be moved in the directions that are really appropriate and right for us as we start this next 6-month cycle and we complete this 18-month cycle. And then we're moving forward and we're integrating this as we move into the next in 2025. Okay, so before we move to the next eclipse, because we're still in this energy, this is what's building now. This is the time. So I just want to invite you to close your eyes for a moment, take your eyes off the screen at least, drop into a space where you can notice a felt sense of being inside of yourself, notice sensation on your skin, air touching you, or a smell or taste that you're connecting with. Just notice sensation. And just notice the whole framework of your body, the whole vessel that you're within. Connect with its resilience, with its adaptability. Scorpio and Taurus are fixed signs. So fixed signs tend to be a little bit more rigid. They're harder for us to let go of. So there might be things that are rooted within that have a hold, and it's hard to let go of that hold because what we hold on to oftentimes in some way gives us a sense of safety, even if it's not protecting us, even if it's actually harming us or holding us back. And so how can you affirm right now, maybe with a hand on your heart or a hand on your belly, that you're safe to let go? You're safe to lean in. You can trust yourself to walk into this next evolution, to leap into this evolved version of you. And you're ready for it. So anything that's holding on to you, anything that you're holding on to, perhaps energetically sending out a signal of freedom, of change, that you're allowed to relate to things differently. You're allowed to show yourself and the world who you know yourself or desire yourself to be. And if you're safe here in your heart, you can experience more freedom throughout. Noticing again a felt sense, experience, sensation, smell, taste, color, visual, and just taking note of that for yourself. And let's see where we're going. Sarah asked a great question before I continue, which is that the eclipse season portal to work with is also bigger than just the time exactly between them, but especially potent to work with in the window. Yeah, this is a great point. So in the ways that we can work with astrology outside of eclipses, we might look at a new moon and a full moon as an isolated event. And we work with the energies of each separately in order to release or welcome in. Because we recognize eclipses as lasting longer and having a deeper impact, we're actually looking at the space between them as more potent, the ways that they come in contact with each other. The north node is the head pulling and the south node is the tail being pulled. And so we're looking at the whole evolution of the two together. And it's the moon cycle that really brings that to life. And so we begin on Tuesday with a new moon. The moon and the sun are in the same place. The moon will start to travel away from the sun and the head will start to pull, right? And then we reach the full moon on November 8th. And that full moon is when the moon and the sun are in opposition to each other. And so that moon has pulled all the way forward from that sun. And now we're looking at the nodes in reflection to each other. We're looking at the nodes as they relate. And so the full moon is one half of the portal, but it continues. And so we'll see that moon continue to pull and the sun continue to remain until we meet at the next new moon, which is on November 15th in Sagittarius. And so a new season will dawn upon us. And it's actually that new moon that closes the portal. And so really we're in this energy of transformation and change and letting go and accelerated leaps, especially as we move towards this full moon, all the way until the new moon in Sagittarius mid-November. And so whether we are resisting it or leaning into it, we are in a time of rapid accelerated change where I would encourage you to consider that everything is relevant. Everything that arises for you is interesting. All these little revelations we might have, we're going to talk about practical ways to really work with the astrology very soon. And so when we think about this, think about all the conversations you have, people you meet, people who might come back into your life as being very important, not just for this month, but for what is set in motion as we move forward. Lots is happening. I think we're all feeling it, right? So lunar eclipse in Taurus is on November 8th. It's a full moon eclipse at 16 degrees of Taurus on the north node, and it is conjunct Uranus. And so we see a conjunction of Venus this coming Tuesday, relationships, matters of the heart, us connecting back with a sense of worthiness. And then we lean forward into the Taurus full moon, conjunct Uranus. This is change. I would say that if we were to anticipate a big emotional energy, that we'll certainly see it in a Scorpio new moon, because Scorpio is very intense and very emotional, but we will absolutely see more building as we move into this full moon eclipse conjunct Uranus. And this might have an effect that is a little bit more externalized or more larger. It may be an abrupt ending or transition. It may be an unexpected revelation coming to the surface, shocking new information, a new sense of freedom arriving. Maybe you put in your 2 weeks at your job, and then it's on that full moon in Taurus that you have completely shifted and things have taken a shape that you didn't anticipate. And so we may see on a larger scale that the rules have obviously changed, and more people may wake up to that. And that may cause some shifts in the ways that we're relating culturally or societally. And so certain ways that we have been plugged into how things are done. Remember, Taurus is an earth sign, so it has to do with the practicalities of living on earth. It's our food systems, our farm systems, the way we use money, the ways that we work with culture. And so that may be something we're really realizing has shifted. The rules have obviously changed, and that might be obvious to some and maybe starting to become more obvious to others, but we can anticipate a big emotional release during this lunar eclipse in Taurus. And so one of the best ways that I would suggest working with it is to resource yourself and to really work with your nervous system over this time. Do less, create more spaciousness, to feel, to experience, to make choices from your intuition. And here are some questions to consider. And I want to invite you to take one of these questions, contemplate it for a minute or two, and share in the chat something that, I've asked some of these questions in various forms throughout this masterclass, but take one, consider it, and maybe declare where you're feeling or where you're standing in terms of these inquiries, or one of these inquiries that really resonates with you. When we see this question or this word worth, standards, values, the head that is pulling that north node in Taurus is asking us to really come to understand what is important to us. What are our values, collectively and individually? And that south node in Scorpio is also asking us to look at the ways that we do or do not act by our values or by our standards because we are enmeshed with another, with the depth of our psyche, with our old habits and patterns, with our own shadow. And it's through the ways that we're enmeshed with our shadow or the shadow of the past that we're actually held back from making the impact that we want to in alignment with our values. It's the fear or the sense that we are not strong enough, capable enough, important enough, relevant enough. These are all worthiness standards, the enoughness of our being. And Scorpio is being illuminated at this time in order for us to find the courage and find the grace to let go and to say, I am enough. I am worth enough. I can use my resources for change. I can stop buying into these systems that are harmful to me and to the world. And because they're harmful to the world, they're harmful to me. And because they're harmful to me, they're harmful to the world. And so we're being asked to raise our standards and then to fight to expand those standards. And so this is a major, major time of unhooking and finding our worth, finding our confidence, finding our strength, finding our people, and getting back to the earth, getting back to real life. And so maybe there's some unplugging to the algorithm life, to the ways that community, major theme from our last series of eclipses last year, the year before, the ways that our sense of community has been altered or our sense of connection has been altered. We bring it back a little closer to home. So take a deep breath. Lots of information in a quick period of time. Here are the charts for the eclipses. If you like to look at charts, what you'll see here is the sun and the moon really close to Venus right here. The three are dancing together in this new moon in Scorpio. And on the south node, relationships, values, worth. And then we see the full moon eclipse on November 8th, and we see the sun here at 16 degrees of Scorpio, and we see the moon at 15 degrees, eventually 16 degrees of Taurus. And so that full moon is conjunct Uranus. Mercury is right there too. And so this is a revolution of our mind. This is a revolution of how we think about things. This is a revolution of our shadow, of our psyche, of the ways that we have holds within us that are holding us back. They're holding us back from our evolution, from our future. And it's major time, major signal that it's time to move into the future. And so what may arise over these couple of weeks are the ways that that is scary, ways that that is so uncertain and unknown, and how we relate to the unknown and to uncertainty, how we relate to change is so major right now. And that can be very, very sensitive realization. And so as you start to navigate through these weeks, what I really want to suggest for you is that you are so sensitive with yourself and you are so caring for yourself, and you dedicate yourself to the earth, to an earth-based practice, meaning you're actually doing something, you're creating a disciplined practice. And a disciplined practice simply means that you are being a disciple of yourself. You're choosing to show up for yourself in meditation, breath work. You can try yoga nidra, you can go for walks, you can go for rest, you can commit yourself to a clean house or to a routine. This is a time of dedicating yourself to your body, to caring for yourself. And that is going to stabilize you in order to understand how these changes relate to you. When life starts to move kind of fast, that's when certain things can go out the window. I know for me, my meditation practice, sometimes even knowing through evidence that it grounds me, it supports me, it gives me a better connection to myself and to my life, it can be the first thing that just gets tossed out when I have to rush through something, or I'm noticing crisis, or I'm noticing change. And so this is a time to commit. This is a time to finish the projects that have started. If you can avoid not starting anything, that would be my suggestion. Just allow it to play out and take notes the whole time. Incorporate a writing practice, morning pages, stream of consciousness writing, honest reflection. Here I am. Here is how I'm feeling. This is what my felt sense experience of my circumstances are, especially if you're sensitive, especially if things are changing around you, drama is rising around you. Remember, this is a time to let go of what you're holding on to and unhook from what's holding you. And how can you rest during this time and receive during this time? Where are you making things too complicated? One of the things I notice so much in the Scorpio South Node tendency is the tendency to make things more dramatic than they need to be, make things more complicated than they need to be. And so we're offered an opportunity in this to make things more simple for ourselves. Consider that we don't have to do things the way that we've been doing them just because we've done them a ton of times that way. And if we're aware consciously that it's not working anymore, then that gets to be our opportunity to try it differently. Because really, there's no failure in this, there's only feedback. And the best way that we can approach this time is to take messy action. All right. Such amazing reflections in the chat in the session this morning, and I really appreciate your time. And I would love to hear how this is landing for you. Is this something that you feel like is relevant to your life right now? It sounds like it is, and in many of the shares in the chats. How can you apply some of the information that you've just gained, as well as the wisdom that's come up within you, into your life and your relationships and the ways that you're relating to the world right now? One of the ways that I find moving through eclipses is most potent and powerful is to have a deeper awareness of how it's affecting me. And so I hope that in this session, you are able to gain that deeper understanding of how some of this is influencing you or impacting you. And as you saw in the chart around houses, there's so much more in understanding how it specifically impacts you, where you are in your life cycle, and how you relate to it. And so I want to invite you that if you're drawn to understand your North Node, I'm introducing a new style of reading in my astrological shop, which is to look specifically at your North Node and to look at how you are evolving in your life journey right now through these eclipses, and what that information can give you as you take shape in this changing time. And so this soul reading is going to be really centered over the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to share that information with you. And in addition to learning more about yourself through this kind of reading, I'm also pairing it in an eclipse package, which includes a mid-eclipse insight session where we will have a check-in, a deep dive astrological look at what is going on in the midst of the eclipse cycle. And then we will have a breath work and yoga nidra practice to really integrate it into the body. And we will close the eclipse portal on the Sagittarius new moon with a second gathering where we'll have real opportunity to integrate in community together and walk through this time. Because I believe when we walk through a major portal like this together, we learn from each other, we grow from each other, and we become closer within ourselves and in our community. And so I'm limiting this experience to only 9 people. So there'll be 10 total of us, which means we'll all have a chance to share and to get to know each other over the course of this eclipse month. We'll be able to process together, understanding our own point of evolution as individuals and place it all together to understand that we all work together and we're all together. And so I want to invite you to join me for the Eclipse program that I will be sharing with you in your replay recording. And as Sarah said, it's time to live from the inside out and to really wake up to the realizations that maybe we've always known the best way for ourselves to live. And this opportunity really can be a coming home. So thank you so much for joining. If you have any comments or questions or insights, you can feel free to add them into the chat. You will receive information from me on the Eclipse program and how to take action from a place of non-action, as Christina said, which is a really beautiful reflection. That it is time to understand our place and our purpose so that we can make a bigger impact. Thank you to everyone, as Megan said, for your honest shares, for connecting together. It means so much that you said yes to this experience and you joined live. And for those of you who are joining in the replay, I hope that you are able to take from this the reflections that you needed and that you're able to share that out with your community. Have a beautiful day, everyone, and I'll see you soon.